regret about how you ran this campaign?
Look, regrets. You always have regrets. I can't think of any, to be honest, to use her expression. I can't think of any. I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. We did great in the first one. We did much better in the second one, but something happened. And this was the best. I would say this was the best campaign we ran.
Welcome back to our pre-election coverage. We're about an hour away from the first polls closing. I want to go to the great Sean Spicer, host of the Sean Spicer Show. Sean, where's your head at? How you feeling, brother?
Man, you know, I love starting my morning with you on Breitbart Radio, so it's kind of cool to team up with you here later in the day. I feel good, and it's not just about vibes and joy, which is what the Harris campaign is all about. It's the data, Mike. You look at the early vote returns. I'll take Pennsylvania, for example. Joe Biden had a 1.3 million vote lead going into Election Day based on the early vote in Pennsylvania in 2020. Republicans have cut that. Democrats haven't shown up. It's 400,000 going in. So, I mean, I didn't take math in college, but I'll tell you, 900,000 is a lot better for us to have cut that deficit down. If you're them, you've got to be really worried about whether or not your people are going to show up.
Yeah, so the question is, how much of that was a cannibalized vote from today, right? So do you think the turnout was still high enough today?
Great question. Two aspects of that. Number one, think about this. Republicans don't generally show up as much early as they do on Election Day. So one, financially, it's super helpful because what it did is it moved a lot of people forward, which allowed them to spend more money on the low propensity voters, those voters that don't vote as often, regularly, or are new voters, right? So number one, you're saving the campaign a ton of money. But number two, and that's the talking point that Democrats are using, when you look at the data, it's not the cannibalization of high propensity voters move forward, right? So a vote on Election Day and a vote early are the same. It's actually a very high percentage of low propensity voters in a lot of these counties in Pennsylvania that are voting early. That is great news for Republicans. Conversely, when you look at some of these key coalitions that Democrats need, and that's what it is, it's a patchwork of different groups of people, right? They're not turning out, especially in the urban areas throughout the battleground states. So Milwaukee, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, their vote is not turning out. And here's why this is different. Republicans still default to turning out on Election Day. Democrats have been conditioned to vote early. So if you're a Democrat and you haven't voted early, the question you have to ask yourself is why? Why would they suddenly revert to Election Day? It doesn't make sense to revert to a pattern like that. And it speaks to, I think, a lot of what we're seeing in the data, which is that people don't think that Kamala Harris closed the deal.
Okay, let's steel man her for a minute. Okay, we got like an hour. We'll find out here in just like an hour, Sean. I mean, we're waiting for we've been talking about this for over a year now, and we're almost there. But give me a steel man for Kamala's best chance here and why her team may be feeling good right now.
Well, number one, I think one of the things that you could see in the early vote is that women are outperforming men by over 10 points. That is potentially good for them. But I've talked to a lot of women that span the age range, right? So you've got young women, middle-aged, older women that just don't like what they've seen policy-wise from Kamala Harris. They think on the Kamala side, they've gone all in on abortion, and this has got to be good for them. I'm not so sure I fully agree with them on that, but that would be one point of light. Now, remember, Mike, here's the interesting thing. In a perfect world for Kamala, right? The Sunbelt states are pretty solid for Trump. At least that's where we walked into today thinking she needs to run all of those blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. One break in that wall and she's done. Best case scenario, if she does run that, she ends up exactly at 270 electoral votes. That's not a lot of margin of error to play with.
Yeah, okay. Her campaign has said not only the women, but late-breaking independents have turned to her. I don't know how they know that, but can you know that, and is that true?
Well, of course you can know it. So there's a difference between what we see and what they say. So on both sides, they've modeled every voter, every one of them. And they'll say, okay, Mike Slater, he is an independent, but he tends to vote Democrat. He's responding. I mean, so they model every single voter. And so they're guessing, of course. They don't know for certain, just like you don't know that a Republican definitely voted for Trump or a Democrat voted for Harris. Yes. But based on the models and the data that they have on every voter, they're pretty certain how people are actually going to perform as voters. So we're trusting their internal models to be right, and that's actually what they're seeing. That doesn't match what I'm hearing, though. On the other side, that a lot of people who are waiting to the very end are voting for her. And also, just keep in mind that they lost the early vote where they needed to be. So they're hoping that these people that they say are late breaking actually show up at the polls as well. And remember, people have basically three choices. You can vote for Trump, you can vote for Harris, obviously a third party, but then you can just not vote. And I think that that's what they've got to be careful of. Low propensity voters are low propensity because they don't have a pattern of regularly voting. And that's where I think the Harris team is bet the whole farm that these people all show up for her on election day, something that would defy a pattern that Democrats have had work for them for the last few cycles.
Great point. Okay, let's talk about an hour from now. Florida, obviously going red, but I think the question is how much, right? So if we say dominant double-digit win in Florida, that's going to be great, right? What else are you looking for in this first batch?
So again, I think to your point about Florida, if we see the results come in with over 10 points, right? If Miami-Dade goes strong Republican, this is going to be a great night for Donald Trump. Then you start to look at North Carolina, that closes at 7:30. Where are we in those Charlotte suburbs? Georgia, same thing. Georgia should report fairly quickly. And again, it's also watching to find out how if they're doing well in those suburban areas outside Atlanta. That's a good sign for them. Virginia closes at 7 o'clock. I think we should see some early results from Northern Virginia. Again, not areas where Trump has to win in Northern Virginia, but if he's keeping this close, that's a huge, huge win for Trump. If he's within 2, 3, 4 points in Virginia, a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points, that's great news for Donald Trump, and it portends well because they really need to be running up the score in the suburban areas, Fairfax County, Prince William, Loudoun County, and Northern Virginia.
If I may, Pennsylvania, of the utmost importance. I saw your interview with Captain K, and he was saying it's Erie County and then the county just north of Allentown. Those are like the two counties that we got to look at to see how well Pennsylvania is going to be doing. What do you say about that?
Yep. Well, that's exactly right. I mean, again, it's what people have to remember is it's not just winning. It's like in counties where Democrats have been doing well. If they don't turn out in the numbers that they're supposed to, that's a positive sign. So there's a lot of these counties in Pennsylvania. Well, I think Bucks County is also another one of those. Allegheny County in the western part where Pittsburgh is where they got a lot of votes out of in the 2020 cycle for Joe Biden. If they underperform there, that's going to be a problem as well. So each of these counties is going to be very telling, and Pennsylvania should report a lot of this stuff there. I don't think they'll be finished anytime soon tonight, but I do think that we're going to get some tells real early as to who's doing what. That doesn't mean we're going to be able to say anything decisive, but it's going to give us a pretty good idea of where things are. I know in 2016, we looked at a lot of the places in North Carolina early and had a sense that we were overperforming and Hillary Clinton was underperforming. We looked at some of those, obviously a lot's changed in Florida, but there's a lot in Florida and in Northern Virginia, as I mentioned. We get a good idea of how the race is flowing.
Got about 60 seconds. Mark Halperin, you've been on his show this last 2 months or so, and he's really jumped out as one of the most influential guys in these last few months, and you played a huge role in that. What was your takeaway from your involvement in that show?
Well, look, at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock on the first every night, I get to talk about, my issues and talk about why I think Trump's going to win. But in the morning, every morning at 9 a.m. on my YouTube channel, we talk with Mark and then Dan Turrentine, have this thing called the morning meeting. And it's meant to reflect the conversations that happen at a lot of networks. It's been fun because you get to hear both sides and the inside baseball, right? That's very different than the show that I do at 7 o'clock on the first and on my YouTube channel at 6. But it's been fun because people can tune in and hear the inside machinations from both sides about what campaigns are really thinking at a particular moment. So I've had fun. We're going to keep it going for the next foreseeable future. Cool. But it's been fun to do that every morning.
Yep. Another opportunity for more Sean Spicer, and you'll have more Sean Spicer tonight. So we got Eric Bowling will be here next to host for an hour. Then Sean Spicer will fill the next hour. That's at 7 o'clock. So that's when some of these polls, or not polls, excuse me, some of these results will be coming in, and then I'll be back with Bill O'Reilly at 8 o'clock Eastern. We'll wrap this up. Sean, great to talk to you, man. Grateful. I can't wait to hear more of you tonight. Appreciate it. Again, I'll be back in just a little bit with Bill O'Reilly at 8 o'clock. We'll have more of these results coming in. This is it. Well done, everyone. You made it. Let me end with this. If you're in line and the polls close, you are allowed to vote. stay in line. Do not let them kick you out of line because it's past closing time. As long as you're standing in line, you can vote. Do not go home. Get in line, stay in line. Eric Bolling next, right here on the First TV.